In a moment, I'm going to share some reflections from a recent trip to Israel that I took. I don't mention any violence in this, but it is at times upsetting, a little bit intense. If you have young children with you, your call. Just this is, my little notice. That if you'd like to step out, you can step out. So last week, I was on a study trip in Israel with an Israel education organization called the I Center. They're based in Chicago. This trip is, much appreciation to them and to this congregation who is committed to their clergy's professional development. And so there are two main objectives for this program: to visit sites and people directly impacted on October 7th, and to meet artists in various fields to learn about cultural responses to October 7th and the ensuing war. Each person we met with, at least a dozen or so, injected some message of hope into our conversations amidst tears and really heart-wrenching stories. This is no small feat given the circumstances. A member of kibbutz Kfar Aza, which is one of the kibbutzim attacked by Hamas on October 7th, hoped that she could return home one day. This is while she toured a group of us around her kibbutz, what was left of it. The curator of the October 7th exhibit at ANU, the Museum of the Jewish People, that Rabbi Green mentioned a couple weeks ago, she hoped that one day soon her exhibit wouldn't sting quite so harshly. Shelley Shem Tov hoped that her son, Omer Shem Tov, would return from captivity in Gaza, now over 300 days in. TV show creator Asaf Bezer hoped that Israel could recapture the unity across all sectors of society that defined the days following October 7th in an attempt to move forward together. And singer Shai Tsabari, who sang at dozens of funerals in October, would tell families of the deceased, "I hope to one day sing at your family wedding." Each one, facing the most devastating circumstances, fiercely held on to a glimmer of hope. Almost everyone. There was the teacher in the South whose students lived on the kibbutzim in the area surrounding Gaza before the war. And when a trip participant from my group asked how they supported students after they returned to school from displacement, evacuation, or in a few cases from captivity in Gaza, she said, "I don't know. I don't know what we can do for them." Then there's my cousin, Sigal, who I met up with during my last night in Israel, who also didn't have much of a message of hope. She and her boyfriend raced me to the airport as I tried to beat airline cancellations and threats from Iran, and she said that they would join me if it weren't for her boyfriend's kids. They're not the only ones who have considered leaving or who have already left. Through all these messages of hope, or lack thereof, one in particular especially resonated with me. Muhammad Darwash, a Palestinian Israeli and director of planning, equality, and shared society at an educational center called Givat Chaviva, had a very specific message of hope, built not just on faith or on vision, but on data. He began a cross-cultural program that has grown to 2,500 Arab Israeli and Jewish Israeli teachers who teach in schools made up of students in the population demographic that is not theirs. Arab teachers in Jewish schools, Jewish teachers in Arab schools. Students at these schools displayed rates of anti-Arab or anti-Jewish racism 6 times less than before this program started. It went from around 60% to it dropping under 10%. And speaking of 6, while October 7th and the tension that followed threatened the continuation of this program, only 6 teachers out of those 2,500 haven't continued this year. That gives me hope. Data, vision, and a blueprint for moving forward. Since my return, I've wondered where that leaves me, where that leaves us as American Jews trying to support our people in Israel. But I'm starting to land in 2 places. First, somewhere in between this message of hope and hopelessness, I thought hope is the very least that I could do. Looking into someone's eyes as they hold on to hope in the most painful circumstances, losing and missing loved ones to terrorism, and seeing much of the world indifferent to their pain, or worse, side with the terrorists, that changed me. Hope is not only a positive expectation of outcomes created by intellect and by analysis. Hope is a life raft when the waters around you feel like they're closing in. Shelley Shem Tov builds a life raft of hope every time she lobbies for a deal to bring the hostages home. Shai Tzabari builds his raft by going on volunteer tours around the country without rest, by meeting with visitors, and by singing songs of hope. Muhammad Darwash builds this raft through his shared society programs, Asaf Bezer by writing messages of unity into his TV show. Hope takes real work, but it begins as a brave act of faith, a choice to see beyond our current circumstances and constraints, a bold perspective within which we can operate. Which brings me to the second place I've landed since coming back from Israel. The power that comes when we can choose our perspective, when we can choose the narrative that we tell about what we're living through. This is also the theme of the book of Torah that we start this week, the book of Deuteronomy, when Moses recaps the Israelites' journey from the particular perspective he chooses to take, and then shares with the Israelites on the precipice of entering biblical Israel. He chooses to take a perspective to prepare the Israelites for life beyond his leadership, subtly amending details from earlier books to tell a story of how the Israelites might succeed. We learned about the narratives we choose to tell when we met with Etgar Keret, a popular Israeli author who told a story from his childhood about when his mom, a Holocaust survivor, took him to the doctor's office. There were only 2 seats in the waiting room, already occupied by another mother and son. The other mother saw them come in and elbowed her son and said, "Get up, offer her your seat, she's a Holocaust survivor." And the son did as he was told and offered Etgar Keret's mom his seat. And she asked, "May I ask why you're giving me your seat?" And the boy replied, "Because you're a Holocaust survivor, and you must have suffered so much, so we want to offer you this seat." To which Etgar Keret's mom replied, "I did survive the Holocaust, which means that if your mother, you, and me were to stand right here for a very, very long time, for hours, for days, I guarantee you that your mom and you would both need to sit before me. So please keep your seat." The exact same event, Etgar Keret's mom surviving the Holocaust, can lead to 2 very different narratives. One is that she suffered and needs to sit. The other is that she survived, and the strength it took to do so makes her stronger, more resilient than your average person. She lived her life by that second narrative. This was Etgar Keret's message to us, as it was to an old age home in the south of Israel that he addressed, who had also suffered and survived. We can't ignore the pain in the story, but we can choose what story we tell. Israel suffered and is still suffering, and the resilience, strength, and hope these people showed me last week is something that I have never seen before. Now that they've shared this perspective with me, that is the story that I'm compelled to tell on their behalf. And in addition to telling their story, this perspective of resilience is one that I'm trying to see through as well. For 10 months, Israel has suffered and has somehow remained resilient. For 10 months, American Jews have been in pain, both vicariously and directly, and we have steadfastly supported Israel and strengthened our Jewish communities by living proud, vibrant Jewish lives. Jews, Israeli, American, otherwise, are a resilient people. We have been for thousands of years, and that fact has not changed. It's only been highlighted since October 7th. Hope starts as a leap of faith, a spiritual act, and then takes a lot of work. We can choose to tell the story of resilience while we do that work together. Encountering Israelis' hope and strength, their heroism, even if they brushed off that label, in this ongoing time of devastation and war, made it impossible for me to be both a cynic and supporter of Israel, even when it feels bleak. A supporter of Israel at its essence and in its purpose, beyond any particular government or policy or military strategy. After a week in Israel, I'm choosing hope, resilience, and strength, and I hope that you'll join me too.